Now, if anybody has any gas left in the tank, you hasn't held them or seen them or want to, and I'll take questions for as long as Philip says we can do it. It's a little after 10 now. Anybody needs to go home or whatever, feel free to do that. My feelings won't be hurt, but if you want to stay and ask questions, I'll answer them. And you're welcome to come up and photograph and hold the skulls.
So,
yes.
I was just checking something. There was a crop circle in England. I think it was 96. Are you familiar with crop circles?
Oh yeah, crop circles. Yeah, I was just with Colin Andrews in Malta the last few days, and he's Mr. Crop Circle. So yes, I'm very familiar with crop circles, yes.
And in SETI sent a platter, 1974, in Puerto Rico to the space with some information about humans. So if some species would find that someday, they could understand who human people are, like DNA stuff and what the matter is made of on the Earth and where planet Earth is to find and all these stuff.
Well, obviously there are a lot of questions. I mean, if I'm understanding the question correctly, and I have trouble with accent sometimes, because I'm not that sophisticated, but I think he's asking, are there answers to come from crop circles? Is that what?
No, I'm not finished yet. So the SETI, I don't...
CSETI, you're talking about
yes.
CSETI, the one listening out?
Yes, they sent a message out. And the message was describing the human DNA.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
all
that's
this
the
stuff.
one that Carl Sagan had something to do with. Yeah.
And then, 25 years later, there was a crop circle in England. And there was like an answer. On the left side, there was the human information they sent out, and on the right side, there was another one. Just similar, but not...
The problem with crop circles, as Colin himself will tell you, is that they're such a popular thing now that a lot of them are man-made. A lot of crop circles, unfortunately, are man-made. So therefore, all of them, unfortunately, become suspect. Now, Colin and people who are really hardcore, serious researchers, they can go in and tell you the difference in a man-made and a real crop circle. And it's fairly simple to do that. A real one has pushed everything over and broken the stems off, like rapeseed and things like that. It's like small, thin celery. So you can see the breaks very easily. Whereas in a real crop circle, the nodes of the plants are like melted and bent over, and it's in a very different form. So it's not that hard to do, but all science is able now to just negate all crop circles as phony. So is the answer going to come from that? Unfortunately, I don't think so, because nobody's going to, the mass of people, we may believe it, but the mass of people will not.
They were also describing what elements are the Earth and the humans are made of, and the answer also contains some information about
crop circles are really
elements.
amazing, but again, if you take the possibility that humans have created them, anything there could be done by humans. There's nothing that shows up that's just absolutely, definitively not from Earth yet that I'm aware of. But again, crop circles are not my field. You really should be talking to Colin Andrews about this, not me. It's really not my thing.
Okay.
Sorry. Anybody else? Yeah, let's try to keep it to the Starchild. That I know about.
What's your email, please?
I just said keep it to stuff I know about.
Yes, what's your email? Because I
my email. Yes, my email.
Which could help
my
you.
email is real simple. Real simple. It's Lloyd, LLOYD at Lloyd Pye, LLOYDPYE.com, or Lloyd Pye, LLOYDPYE at gmail.com. But also on the websites, it's all over. Listen, I'm one of the easiest guys in the world to get in touch with. Absolutely easy. It's all over the place. I do not try to hide. Lloyd Pye at Gmail. Lloyd Pye at Gmail. Either one of those works. They both go to the same place. Okay? Any other questions? And that's a good one, and thank you for asking, because it gives me hope.
He lives in Florida, right next to you.
Oh, you're going to Florida?
No, that would be a deal maker for you.
Oh, perfect.
I have somebody which makes this kind of stuff.
What town? Do you know the
In
town?
Miami.
Oh, Miami, not next door, but okay, I'll go to Miami.
I mean,
Not a
pretty
problem.
much next door.
Not a problem, not a problem. I'll go to Miami.
I send in your email and then you guys can take contact.
That would be great. That would
Okay.
be absolutely wonderful. Okay, any others? Somebody over here. Yes, get some sleep. Thank you very much for coming.
This is only one skull. Are there maybe more skulls or more Starchilds? I mean,
Say again?
this is only one Starchild.
Yes, there is only one Starchild. People ask me this a lot. Are there any other skulls of interest? And yes, there are. Thank you, dear. Yes, there are. The cone heads. I don't know how many of you know anything about the cone heads. But the cone heads are skulls that have very elongated heads like this. Have you seen them? There were some in Malta. They're found around the world, but in small numbers, except in Peru. They're in the hundreds in Peru. Hundreds. Go into Peruvian museums, you can see racks of them. All right, now, what are the cone heads? They have very human faces, but they're bulkier. But all the things that the Starchild doesn't have in terms of human physiology, they have. Except they have this head that holds a brain twice the size of our brain. Literally. 2,800 to 3,000 cubic centimeters of brain. And x-rays show that the head is filled with that brain. The veins go in the bone like you saw. There's no question. No question. They have brains twice the size of ours. That is not human. Based on what I know about this, I believe that the cone heads are not entirely human, and that their DNA should be sequenced exactly the way the Starchild's is being sequenced. And I can tell you that when this is going to happen, I'm going to be a wealthy man. It's just unavoidable. And what I'm going to do with part of that wealth, for sure, is the first thing, as soon as I can get my hands on a cone head, I'm going to sequence one the same way. Why stop with the Starchild? I believe the cone heads are every bit as significant, but to my knowledge, to this moment, if a cone head has ever been genetically tested, I do not know about it. They've kept the answer secret, whatever it is. And I would think it would be stupid of them not to, since 2006, since they've had the ability to do it. I would not be surprised if somebody already has done it and the answer is so shocking that they just, snuffed out. Okay, any others? These are good.
The concept of three-person fertilization is a very interesting one. And I wonder, in the next generation, that child, is he or she also fertile or not?
Yes. Yes. They are fertile. Because, and remember, when that child has offspring, that mitochondrial DNA is now stuck in its line. That new mitochondrial DNA will never go back to its mother's DNA. There's no way to do that. It keeps, but the offspring is going to have one mitochondrial DNA with the parent. You see what I mean? Mitochondrial DNA, and then it'll have the sex cell, its sex cell go in with somebody else's, and if it's a female, it's her mitochondrial DNA that goes down. Okay. All right. Next one. Behind you, I think. Yeah.
This year it was said that science concentrated so much on DNA and neglected RNA. Like RNA, as the old grandmother, was just neglected. And
right.
That science would go back, whatever that means, would concentrate more on RNA, which is not so easy to move on board. Can you say something about this?
Well, I know that RNA figures into it a lot, but because RNA is sort of subjugated to how it works with DNA. DNA is apparently the dominant chemical reactor in all of life ahead of RNA. Although RNA is essential, take RNA out of the formula and life would fall apart. But right now, I'm barely up to speed with the DNA. I mean, you can tell I'm flabbergasted. It's not my field. I'm not an expert in it. I'm knowledgeable, but I'm not an expert. So when it comes to RNA, we just don't talk about it because, as you can see, all of the technology for recovery and reading is is devoted to DNA. RNA just doesn't figure into it. DNA seems to be able to tell them everything they need to know in terms of the base pairs and everything. So right now, I don't know where RNA is going to figure into it, although I do know that RNA is a very... In fact, there's a lot of debate about which came first, RNA or DNA, because you can't have one without the other. And it's like if you want to buy into the evolutionary theory, one of them had to come first. If you don't want to buy, if you can't buy into design in any form, you have to go with evolution. And if you have to go with evolution, RNA or DNA had to come first, but you can't have one without the other. Chicken or egg. So I don't really have a good answer for you there, I'm sorry.
That's okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Come on, dig down deep. Somebody's got something. Don't be afraid. Hey, oh, she's got one. Okay, there you go. She's got one. Yeah, again.
So, since it turned out that that female skeleton wasn't his mother, could it have been his spouse?
Could have been. Could have been. She certainly had a lot of emotional attachment to the Starchild, whatever that relationship was. And I should have mentioned that. If she's not its mother, it means she's a spouse, lover, guardian, something like that. But it really, I got to tell you, that result in 203 really threw us for a loop, because we had concocted this scenario that really made sense based on the star being legends of the Mesoamerican Indians, north and south, and in other parts of the world too. Once a lady named Paula Gunn Allen, when she heard me do a radio show, she was an emeritus professor. She died 2 years ago, but at that time she was an emeritus professor of anthropology at UCLA. I mean, a very credentialed woman who had written books, and she was an American Indian. So she had studied, one of her major fields of study was the star being legends, and I'd never heard of it. But what that is these tribes, as I said earlier, say that beings would come, beings from the stars, star beings, would come down to the village, pick a woman that didn't have a child, make her pregnant, and tell the village, you are now all responsible for this baby when it's born, to raise it up to the age of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, and we'll come back and get it, and when we come, it better be here. It better be in good shape. So everybody's got to help her and do all that. And this is apparently the way they did their program back hundreds of years ago, when there was just no communication in the world. If they tried to do that now, we'd be known the next day. So they have to do this other program that they've developed, which is harvesting, where they implant it and get it started in a woman, and they take it out and they grow it in a jar. Now, I can do this if you want. It'll blow your mind, some of you, but I have a book here in my bag that I can take out and put on the table, and it is it was done by a young man in the late 90s who asked all over the world, sent the world out through channels of alternative people, said, if you think you have been taken on board a craft, and if you have encountered aliens, I want to hear from you, and I want to hear what you say they look like. And he was an artist, and he just collected them and made a book. And they divided up into categories. You want to see it? A lot of times people get bent out of shape when I show them this if they're not ready for it. So, oh, by the way, cone heads, as long as we're talking, these are cone heads. See cone heads? Brought them up. Thumbs upside down, got a card. They practiced trepanning, incredibly enough. That one lived for a while with that much of its skull gone. Believe it. It's another one. They're common. They're common. But they're not talked about because of being just so incredibly bizarre. Oh, excuse me. I have some cards here if anybody wants a card. Sorry. There you go. Anyway, this book. See this book? A Visual Guide to Alien Beings by David Chase. Now you see those ones on the cover. You have the blue men that look like the little fire plugs. They are the rarest of the rare. These are the least seldom seen. I was doing this one time in New Zealand, and I pulled this out and showed it, and a woman in the audience just screamed, "Oh, thank God, somebody is there! Nobody believes me when I say I saw these little blue men." You know, so that was really cool. But you have the small grays, you have the tall grays, you have another reptilian mixture. This one, reptile mixed with gray, gets this. These, the Pleiadians, Lyrans, Anunnaki, whatever you want to call them, the ones that look like humans, the perfect blondes, you know, you hear about them, the ones that are just so beautiful and all, they mix with the grays to produce this. And so we thought maybe, well, that's humans too, maybe mixing with them to produce these. But anyhow, if you look in, and this is this kind of funny little anecdote. There is another type here, the insectoids. They look like insects, right? And the reptiles look pretty bad as it is. And you notice he put that one in a big hooded robe. And so I said, David, why did you leave the insects out and put the hood on the... He says, man, I didn't want to scare people off with a really bad cover. So he left the insects out and he draped the reptilian. But anyway, so if you go through what he found and was kind of a surprise. Okay, here we go with the, I was trying to show that's a reptilian. And they start, and right away, about the third page, you see that one of them growing in a test tube. People see this when they're on board the craft. They see the growing in the test tubes. Here's a rack of them. Growing in jars after the 4th month when they harvest them. Again and again, women would report seeing it.
Have you talked to one of these women?
Well, I've talked to about a dozen women who claim to have had this experience. Josie Galanti, the one you saw that sent the pictures. But yeah, I've talked to about a dozen. They don't like to tell their story too often because people, it's emotional. They cry every time. They get very emotional about it. They really do. I mean, and you can't blame them. And men are even worse. Men are horribly, horribly embarrassed because you've all heard the term, I'm sure, anal probe, right? And that's the big joke that's, you've been anal probed. Yeah, the aliens got you there. You know, it's a very, very sensitive subject for men, but that's how they get the sperm. That's where it's located, so you got to go after it. So anyhow, it's hard to get men to talk about it, and when they do, they're very, very angry and just want to just punch something, but they can't because you're helpless when you go through that. But it's very humiliating to men and women both. Full rack of blue men, full rack of the reptilians, and these are the insectoids, insects. They're Pleiadian humankind, more insects. Anyway, just a whole book of them. Unfortunately, he quit publishing this, so that's a very valuable copy that I take care of. But that's part of it. The star being thing does seem to have been the program hundreds of years ago, and this seems to be the program now. So there seems to be some continuity, and whatever they create those children for, they don't seem to be fertile. They don't seem able to reproduce themselves. You know how mules, most hybrids are not fertile? You know that, right? So you have to keep making more of them. And so apparently that's the situation. These beings are not fertile, and they have to keep making them, and some part of us has to be in them for them to function wherever they go. That's what seems to be the case. That's the best guess. Yes?
Lloyd, did I understand this correctly, that in 1999 it was said that the Starchild is a male?
Male.
But
right.
that was wrong. So
totally wrong, right?
Now we do not know.
Well, most of the people working in that lab were men. Very few girls,
No,
2 or
but
3.
do we know by now, 2010, which sex Starchild has?
No, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, no, we do not. We do not. We won't know. We'll know when we do obviously, when we do the recovery. Obviously, we'll know then. But we do not know the sex of the Starchild now. We do not. No.
Lloyd, I have a question concerning the cone heads, because
Sure.
I was always told that these cone heads, they have put some winding, some sort of plaster around the head so that it grows only in this direction instead of in this, and that this then formed such a head. But
Well,
I can really not think of this.
They
It
say,
sounds a bit
this
silly.
is science's answers. I have a simple answer. The heads were bound. Well, yeah, okay. There are bound heads. There are cultures that bind heads, no question about it. But you do that with either boards, like the Flathead Indians did of America, in which you take 4 boards and you do it, and it shows clear on the bone because it's soft bone. Or, like in Africa, they take string and they tie string very tightly around it, coil it. I don't know if you've ever seen that. And the string dents are right in the bone when they die. The string dents are clearly there. I mean, you can see manipulation in the bone, right? Now, look at those 3 and see if you see any sign of manipulation at all. You don't. And if you were going to bind the head, you wouldn't have a big knot up here, right? And you know why that knot is there? Because with all of this extra head sitting back here, that's where your 3-way suture for the coronal and the sagittal suture is. So that's the soft spot in a baby, right? You understand what I'm saying? Soft spot. So that has in these has to be bigger, thicker, stronger to hold this head together. And sure enough, big bump here, big bump here, big bump here. Not bound. And does it look bound? Do you see convolutions on it or do you not? Does it look perfectly smooth or does it not? No, it doesn't. It's just clearly natural. And yet, every scientist that you take this issue of conehead to, I promise you will say those are just bound.
The volume cannot increase.
The volume cannot increase. They don't even talk about that. It has to be bound because there is no answer that we can tolerate that accepts the idea that these are not humans, or not entirely humans. Science is so crippled by its inability to admit error. You know, it just has this absolute aversion to admitting error. And do you know why? But they've painted themselves into this corner of infallibility because if they were to acknowledge the areas where they don't know what they're talking about, what does that do for the creationists? They are in an all-out cutthroat war with creationists to keep Darwinian evolution sacrosanct, to not let the creationists ever get an inch on them. So everything they do is to pretend that they can't make mistakes, that they don't make mistakes. Even though all of science forever in history up to this moment is one long series of corrected mistakes. That is all science is. It is one long series of corrected mistakes. And they know that, and so they do their very, very best to whistle through the graveyard and hope that nobody notices. Because they want to stay the boss of who knows what. I love this lady. She just sits there smiling at me. It's just, she's wonderful. You've made this whole thing a real delight with that just wonderful smile. Thank you very much. She just sits there saying, I love this. I am loving this. Are you really liking it that much? Yeah, okay, all right. Anybody else? Any other questions? I can't believe, there are never this many people here and the questions run out. It always comes down to like the last 10. You know, the last 10 run out of gas. But normally when you have this many, the questions keep coming. Well, it's late. It's been a long night. If you're all ready to call it a night, again, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. I hope that I will have some very good news for you. If you want to keep up with what we're doing, get with my mailing list. It's on the Starchild Project website. Join the mailing list. I communicate through that. I don't communicate very much through Facebook, though I do have a fan page. I don't communicate very much through YouTube, though I'm all over YouTube. I communicate with my mailing list. It's a lot easier to just do the one because those people send the word out, you know, drifts out like that. So if you want to keep up with what I'm doing and keep up with the latest, join the mailing list. It's free. You just go on, click a few buttons, and there you are. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Okay? All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you.